Chapter 54 We Go Together 3. For a moment, it seemed like everything slowed down. Ryan became hyper-aware of his surroundings, Jeremy's grip firm in his, noticeably dry despite his nerves and the exertion, the recognizable side effects of a surge of adrenaline. His own heart was pounding in his chest, and the heat radiating from the charred ruins of the building behind him contrasted with the cool air he was throwing himself into. They had all jumped together. Ryan hadn't even felt a tug of resistance from Jeremy, and the lad would have been terrified. Now it appeared they were all falling together, hundreds of feet above the city streets, where the LSPD and bureau agents were trying to push back the wave of rioters that had broken the perimeter and were beginning to take hold in the streets surrounding the FIB building. Air support was nowhere to be seen. Jeff had taken out the Valkyrie. For them. A Valkyrie took him. Seems fitting. Bad things happen to heroes. Memory of his own words mocked him. "Pull your chutes!" Trevor's voice yelled in his ear over the rushing of air, snapping him back to reality. Ryan immediately pulled his ripcord. Jeremy was only a split second behind him, and to their relief, both caught the familiar jerk of air resistance at once and were pulled back by the deceleration. Ryan saw Michael and Gavin deploy their chutes a moment later, and then Jack pulled his ripcord. At first, it looked like Trevor had simply hesitated, but then they heard the scream. As Jack's chute deployed and opened, he grabbed Trevor's free arm, the other still frantically tugging at the ripcord. His chute had deployed, but it was a tangled mess and refused to open, trailing behind him but doing little to slow his descent. "Jack!" Trevor gasped, eyes wide with terror. "I've got you." Jack grunted as Trevor latched onto him, grabbing his arm with both hands as they tried to find a better way to hold onto each other. Jack's parachute was holding up, taking their combined weight. They were falling faster than the others, but that wasn't entirely a bad thing. The longer they were in the air, the more of a target they were, so long as they could find somewhere to land that wouldn't see them both break their legs on impact. Trevor was still panicking. Ryan doubted he was even aware of it. "Trevor, it's okay. I've got you. I'm not letting you go. We're gonna make it, okay?" Jack reassured him. Ryan was intently fixed on them. Everyone was. So much so that the debris falling around them came as a surprise when it nearly knocked him and Jeremy out of the sky. "Oh, shit! What was that?" Jeremy tried to twist around to look up, but the fabric of their parachutes blocked out most of their view. "The building's coming down." "That's not our only problem," Michael observed, pointing to the ground, where, despite the debris, armed police officers and agents were moving up on their position, yelling over the chaos, some taking aim with their sidearms, a few even taking the shot as if they actually had a chance of hitting them from that distance, all trigger discipline apparently gone to hell. Then it clicked. There was no coordination. They weren't following explicit orders anymore. Ryan's eyes scanned over the ground, his attention catching on a few rioters that had broken the lines. The police were only defending themselves. A few had even started retreating. "Guys, their comms are down," Ryan yelled out. "They can't coordinate." "How can you tell?" Gavin asked with a sniff, still recollecting himself. "You're right. They're not all shooting at us. They look confused," Michael noted. "Bingo," Ryan confirmed. "They haven't been giving an order. It's everyone for themselves. Some are running away. Look." He pointed out the group that had run, the rioters not bothering to chase them, turning their focus instead to the ones still determined to put up a fight. Ryan could have sworn he recognized a couple of the tattooed hooligans, throwing themselves headlong into the fight like the lunatics they likely were. "They've got the right idea," Jeremy grinned at Ryan. It again struck him just how fortunate they were that Jeff had set up the family. He'd always been looking out for them, right until the end. Below them, Jack and Trevor were almost down, their combined weight on the shared parachute having sped their descent. Mika's voice in their ears caught them a bit off guard. "We're coming to pick you up. Some of you are going to have to hold them off for a bit. Matt's good, but not good enough to make a getaway in the fire truck, so Andy went to pick him up, and they're taking their sweet time getting back." "Hey, we're working on it," Andy replied, tuning in. "I'm on my way. Matt's just getting a car." Matt grumbled something, and it sounded like he was holding something between his teeth. There was a growl of engine, something high performance, and Matt tried again. "Just needed to find the right vehicle for the job." "That would be any vehicle, Matt," Jeremy pointed out. "I thought you guys liked to travel in style." Ryan suddenly thought of Jeff and his heart skipped a beat. B-Team didn't know. The tone of the crew immediately fell. Right now, we just need to get out of here, Jack said. I'm almost at you, Mika said. I can take 3. Matt and Andy will have to sweep for the remaining 4. This miscount felt like a dagger to the heart. No one bothered to correct her. Not yet. Trevor and Jack landed in a heap on the ground. Trevor cried out in pain as the pressure shifted from his arm. He'd likely dislocated it when Jack had caught him. He was alive, though. That was the main thing. You saved my life, Jack. Ryan could almost hear Jack thinking it. No, Jeff did. Jeff saved all of us. It hurt. We're okay, Jack reassured him. Mika's hot pink EC came screaming around the corner, surprisingly with no vehicles in pursuit. The rest of the crew hadn't even touched down yet as she threw the door open and instructed Trevor and Jack to climb in. Where's Jeff? Mika asked, looking around at the rest of the crew as they began to land. He's not coming, Jack said stiffly. Is he... Mika must have read the look on Jack and Trevor's faces, because even from the distance he was at, Ryan saw her hands fly to her face. Oh my God. Trevor's hurt. We need to restock. We should get back and regroup, Jack said, taking charge. Approaching sirens and the squeal of tires indicated the cars that had been in pursuit of her had finally caught up. Go, Ryan agreed. We'll sit tight for Matt and Andy. We got this. He wasn't sure they did, but they couldn't afford to lose Jack and Trevor. Not now. Not after. You're sure? Mika asked, still shaken. Go, Ryan urged, more gently than expected. Okay. Mika put the car in gear and shot off, the police vehicles only slowing down for a moment to gauge the scene before apparently deciding to continue the pursuit. She'd have to lose them, but that was evidently something she was more than capable of. Meanwhile, the riots seemed to grow around them, people spilling down the streets, throwing petrol bombs, igniting the sidewalks, chanting and raging against the night. Ryan spun around, feeling the sudden compulsive need to know the exact position of the lads. Jeremy was to his right, Michael was behind him, and to his left, Gavin a little closer to him but further back, nearest to the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the FIB entryway. For a brief second, Ryan caught his reflection in the glass. His face paint was somehow still immaculate, and it only served to make the image all the more terrifying as the rioters surged forward, framed against a backdrop of orange flames licking through curls of thick smoke given off from the homemade incendiary devices, the red and blue flashing light and sirens growing ever more present all around them. Who would have thought the fakes could rally so much support on the streets? Jeff, apparently. Stop thinking about it. He tried to convince himself. He needed to be functional. The lads are counting on you. Weapons! What have we got? Ryan asked. The police cruisers were slowly starting to surround them at a distance. The heroes determined to bag themselves a fake were starting to close in. The lads all looked to Ryan. Not enough for this, Michael said quietly. The honesty and resignation in his voice was heartbreaking. Matt, Andy, ETA. Ryan checked over the radio. Matt sounded like he was concentrating, the roar of the engine audible as he pushed the car as hard as it could go. Just hang in there. Almost there. If anyone could make it, it was Matt, but even Matt couldn't work miracles. The circle of cars and agents grew steadily as they seemed to be working out the best way to approach the skeleton crew of fakes. They were still deadly enough with just the 4 of them that the authorities maintained their distance, analyzing the situation. They didn't have long before they'd get cocky enough to try something. Boys, Ryan tried to keep his tone light. This might be it for us. No matter what happens, we go out swinging. Blaze of glory. Blaze of glory, Michael repeated. Gavin actually huffed a laugh. I suppose I can't say I'm surprised. Jeremy giggled, but it was laced with nerves. Guys, it's been fun. It sure has. In the distance, a pair of flashing blue and red lights were growing steadily stronger. Ryan braced himself for the worst. The 2 cruisers approached them at speed. For a second it looked like they weren't going to stop, but at the last possible second, the tires of both squealed to a halt and the cars drifted to a stop right in front of them. Ryan braced himself, but Jeremy ran forward. Jeremy! Ryan started to move after him. Like hell he was letting the kid take another bullet for him. The door to the cruiser flew open and Matt's head poked out the window. long, shaggy hair hanging about his grinning face. Thought you could use a lift. Just behind him, Michael and Gavin were hurriedly scurrying into the other cruiser, driven by Andy. Jeremy jumped into the passenger seat, and Ryan ducked as bullets flew past his head as he climbed into the back seat. Fucking A. Matt, you're a goddamn hero. As soon as he slammed the door shut behind him, Matt was taking off again, hitting the streets of Los Santos at breakneck speeds with the practiced ease of a professional driver, while Andy, with Michael and Gavin right behind him, managed to keep up with all his highly technical maneuvers. Told you I was going to get you in style. Just needed the right vehicle. That you did, Ryan confessed. And that you did, Jeremy repeated. As they rounded the corner of the building, they passed the twisted, smoking wreck of a Valkyrie entangled in the still flaming remains of a Buzzard. As soon as Ryan realized what he was looking at, it felt like someone had knocked the air out of his lungs. There was little doubt in his mind that Jeff hadn't survived whatever they heard, but he wasn't fully ready to process it yet. Seeing the wreck was almost worse than seeing a body. He swallowed hard and looked at Jeremy, eyes wet with tears as he too tracked the wreck as they passed it. He knew Michael and Gavin would be doing the same. Matt kept his eyes on the road, but he sensed it. Jeff? He didn't make it, Ryan replied simply. Matt didn't push it, shaking his head a little and pressing his foot harder onto the accelerator. Jeremy and Ryan sat in silence as Matt navigated the streets and riots, leading the police away from the downtown area, while somehow Andy kept up. They lost the authorities before looping back, and under the guise of actual police cruisers, they barely got a second glance from other officers on the scene. They discreetly pulled into the garage of the penthouse, Andy still right behind them, and they noted Mika's e-seat indicating Jack and Trevor were already here. They'd probably gone over what happened. For what felt like the first time since they'd left the penthouse, Ryan took a breath. He let it out, long and steady and slow. You got this. Gavin, Michael, and Jeremy were bleary-eyed as they got out of the cars and made their way to the elevator, barely exchanging more than a few sniffles as they rode it to the top. When they arrived, they were greeted with the sight of Mika and Lindsay sitting by medical supplies with Jack and Trevor, the girls in half embrace. Jack's eyes were red as he tended Trevor's arm, securing it in a sling for the time being until someone could take a better look at it. As soon as she looked up, Lindsay immediately rushed to pull Michael into a hug. The atmosphere was somber. I can't believe he'd do that. Michael shook his head and smiled sadly. What an asshole. The others sniffed laughter. What happens now? Gavin asked, echoing the thoughts of many others in the room. Lindsay let go of Michael. Well, I let Bruce know what happened. I'll leave it up to him to tell the others when he thinks it's right. But as far as they're concerned, they're sticking to the plan. They're in this deep anyway. What'd Bruce say about it? Jeremy asked, trailing off. Lindsay shook her head, looking a mixture of confused and amused. He just said, fuck omelets, and that he was sorry. He really looked up to Jeff. We all did, Jeremy said flatly, Gavin nodding in agreement. There was a long silence. So what do we do now? Lindsay asked. We could leave, Trevor suggested. Jack shook his head. Not that easy. All our exit strategies are plan Bs. All that went up with the safe houses. All except mine, Lindsay interrupted. We still have the option to leave. I have passports and cash. Not much, but enough. We could run. We could pack up and leave the city, scatter so we can't be traced, start fresh somewhere else. Scatter. Ryan mentally recoiled at the thought. No. Stay together. That's what Jeff had said. The fakes would never up and leave like that. That's not how they were designed to go out, and they knew it. One by one, they shook their heads. Even Lindsay knew it was never going to happen. Ryan looked around at the unanimous decision. No. Tonight, whatever happens, no one is left behind. We go together. It was unsaid, but they all knew what it implied. They'd all give their lives for the crew, and they were okay with that. This is where we started, on the streets, in bloodshed. These people we're fighting alongside, they're fighting for the same thing as us, Jack said. Michael nodded. This is where we belong. We're not the bad guys anymore. We have to finish this, Jeremy added. Yeah, we fight, Ryan spoke up. Until we win. For Jeff, Gavin chimed in. For us. Once more into the fray. They tended their wounds, replaced their armor, and headed back to the garage to restock their weapons. This time, they would take only what they could carry onto the street. They knew what needed to be done. Maximum chaos. Make the LSPD and FIB run home with their tails between their legs. Reclaim Los Santos. Even if it means razing the city. The fake AH crew stepped out onto the street, filled with the scent of burning gasoline and gunpowder and smoke hanging in the cool night air, the wail of sirens punctuating the background buzz of the city. Not far off they could hear the rabble, the riots. They could see the orange flames reflected in the glass of the surrounding buildings, the reds and blues of flashing lights cutting through the dark smoke. They could hear the crackle of gunfire, the shouts of the others, the family fighting alongside them. It felt familiar. Right. To Ryan's right, Jack, Matt, and Trevor, still beside them despite his dislocated shoulder. To his left, Jeremy, Gavin, and Michael, the lads he'd promised to watch over. So, maximum carnage, right? Michael asked. There was a moment of silence where they anticipated Jeff's confirmation, but when it didn't come, Ryan felt a familiar rush of adrenaline, and within him something stirred. They were waiting on him. That's it, he nodded. Everybody dies. Around him, nervous laughter echoed quietly, growing more relaxed as it continued until it only felt genuine, almost confident. As they began to make their way towards the front lines of the riots, Trevor's phone buzzed, the one Jeff had left with him. He paused and glanced at the screen, reading over the message a few times, almost in disbelief. What is it? His voice was quiet, shocked. The IAA are stepping in. Wait, does that mean... Jeremy started, trailing off at the look overcoming Trevor's face. The relief in the air was palpable as his lips curled into a smile and he nodded slightly. We won. The celebration wasn't immediate, lost in a moment of reflection, reverence. They'd won, but they'd lost so much along the way. Ryan swallowed, taking it in, looking around at the crew, his crew. The people he'd give his life for, and he knew would give theirs in return. Slowly, they all smiled, grins growing wide and eventually erupting into laughter and celebrations. Despite all they'd been through, they knew, as long as they had each other, whatever happened, whatever came at the fake AH crew, it would never destroy them. Not completely. The end.